The real question here is quiet quitting useful to you, or would you just be wasting your time if you're doing it? So what is quiet quitting? Is it handing in your resignation and then quietly slipping out the door? So in this video, let's talk about what quiet quitting actually is. Have I ever quietly quit? But most importantly, how, if you are quiet quitting right now, can use that to your advantage to actually change your life and your career for the better. Okay, what is quiet quitting, and is it a real trend? Quiet quitting, doing the minimum requirements of one's job and putting in no more time, effort, or enthusiasm than absolutely necessary. So the funny thing is that when someone's quiet quitting, they're not actually quitting because they're still employed and they continue to collect a salary. So quiet quitting simply means that an employee no longer puts in any more effort into their job than absolutely necessary. People have quietly quit for decades. The only difference is that now, especially since the pandemic, quiet quitting has sort of become a trend. Some people even think that quiet quitting simply means worker dissatisfaction. But I'd say that it's not just about being dissatisfied. Dissatisfaction with work can be expressed in very different ways. You can be dissatisfied with your work, but just internalize it and pretend you're happy at work and continue to give your all and put on a happy facade. But when you're actually quiet quitting, you're expressing your huge dissatisfaction with work by just not giving your all anymore. You're no longer willing to put in 150% and go above and beyond your job responsibilities to grow the company and prove yourself as a capable and worthy employee. You simply just stick to your basic job description, go home at 5 on the dot. You just don't do more than absolutely necessary. Professor Anthony C. Klotz and Mark C. Bellino observed, quiet quitters continue to fulfill their primary responsibilities, but they're less willing to engage in activities known as citizenship behaviors. No more staying late, showing up early, or attending non-mandatory meetings.
It's very nice to see all of you.
So you're not even pretending to care anymore to get promoted or to get noticed. And it reaches the point that even when your colleagues or your employer notice, you don't really care. And as you might guess, yes, as a result of quiet quitting, people actually get fired.
Darren, you're fired. Fired?
And are these people who get fired really surprised about it? I don't think so. Many of them, I would say, actually hope to get fired because that provides them with some relief. It's actually not that easy to quit your job and just resign. It takes so much courage to say, no, I had enough, I want to leave it and look for something else. So instead of just proactively resigning, they go into this mode of quiet quitting. If I get fired, then so be it. An administrative assistant identified at Christy G said in part, I do not interact with anything from work before 7 or after 4:30, which is the time my office is open. I work in a corporate setting, so my tasks are not life and death. If someone asks for something, like maybe a file scan or something like that, at the end of the day, it can wait until the next day. I actually have a slightly different opinion on this. I do not think that such an example is an example of quiet quitting, but rather an example of simply having boundaries. Having boundaries at work versus quiet quitting are two really different things. Having boundaries at work is simply the ability to say no to certain things that you think are not right. For example, you do not think that it is right that you are contacted to do some work at 8 p.m., for example, without additional compensation, but it does not necessarily mean that you do not care about your work. Whereas quiet quitting actually means that you do not care anymore, and you're actively withdrawing from your work and any kind of additional responsibilities that might be put upon you. Quiet quitting is not caring anymore and feeling apathy towards your work. According to Gallup, it's estimated that at least 50% of the US workforce can be classified as quiet quitters. Wow, that's a lot. And if this is true, then the number would be more than 80 million. And unfortunately, this is not a hooray for employees who are quietly quitting but still getting paid. It's actually a total waste of time, but I'll talk more about that later. So by now, you might have identified whether or not you are a quiet quitter, and if that's the case, then please do let me know in the comments below. But Not all quiet quitters are the same, and this is where it gets interesting. I would divide quiet quitters into two main groups. Group 1 are people who are simply withdrawn, who do not care at all about work and kind of lost hope about the future, do not seek any kind of advancement and just want to lay back. And people who are simply not interested in progress, in learning more, in becoming a better person, in advancing. But then there is Group 2, people who do want to progress in their career. They want to contribute something meaningful, something useful to the company, but they just feel the company is simply not providing them with the infrastructure or a system that allows them to do that. And that is why they've become so frustrated and so disillusioned with work that they chose to withdraw and just not try anymore. They no longer feel appreciated. They feel a bit exploited. But these people in Group 2, because it's in their nature that they want to grow and learn, they just do not feel comfortable staying put, staying in that status quo of quiet quitting for too long. If you're in Group 2, a phase is all that it is, after which you transition into something better. Now, have I personally ever been a quiet quitter? I guess sort of, although I don't really want to admit it. But if I really think about it, I might have been a quiet quitter for a few months. So this is what happened. As many of you guys know, I started my first career in banking as a project manager. At first it was really exciting, but after a while I noticed that it's really not for me, and the workload, the amount of work was just crazy. And although I did feel some appreciation, I didn't feel adequately rewarded, and every time that I asked for a substantial raise, it was like talking to a wall because nothing would ever happen, led me to feeling extremely underappreciated and experiencing burnout. And then I started planning my escape, and that whole planning process lasted for about, I would say, 1 year plus. And to be fair, I must say that during the last, let's say, 3 to 4 months, I was sort of quiet quitting. I was no longer giving it my all. When previously I was working until 9 and 10, sometimes on the weekends even, and I would be super proactive and always push at all of my projects to make sure that we'd get to the next stage of it. During these last 3 to 4 months, I just no longer cared that much because I knew that, okay, after this, I would be starting a new chapter of my life. And it was extremely difficult for me at that time because I had this really high sense of responsibility. I felt that as long as I was still being paid, I had to give it my all. But to be honest, I did not give it my all anymore. I just made sure that everything kept running and I did my tasks, but I didn't do much more than that. Am I proud of it? No, but that was just the reality at that time. Also, if I emailed someone or called someone and would not get a response, back then I would usually follow up again until I got an answer. But during those last few months, I just didn't care anymore. If the person didn't respond, I just left it at that. Once I realized that I was sliding into that state of quiet quitting, I knew that I had to get out of there as soon as possible. It was even a motivational factor for me because I looked at myself, I looked at my work ethic and my motivation at work, and everything was going down the drain. So I knew that I didn't want to stay and linger in this kind of really uncomfortable and unproductive situation any longer, and that helped me to speed up my escape from my job even faster. And in case you're quiet quitting right now, this is what I would suggest to do. Wanting to be a quiet quitter is really human. It's perfectly normal. It's a reaction to either burnout, not being appropriately rewarded, feeling underappreciated, or all of the above. But well, the question is what to do next, right? Doing your bare minimum at work, just according to your contract, just fulfilling your basic tasks, is not against the law. But that's not the question here. The real question here is quiet quitting useful to you, or would you just be wasting your time if you're doing it? And I'd say that you're definitely wasting your time if you're lingering in quiet quitting mode for too long. If you experience quiet quitting and you stay there, let's say for 2-3 months while you're figuring out your next steps, then I think that is fine. And I don't think you're wasting your time because you are just using this this transition phase to gear up for your next stage, your next chapter. But if you just stay in quiet quitting mode and you no longer learn, you no longer grow, then honestly, you're just wasting your time. And I'd go as far as to say that you're even ruining your life because you might be missing out on a ton of great opportunities. When you're quiet quitting, you're unconsciously developing this attitude of withdrawal, apathy, and not caring. And if you do that for too long, the risk is that that kind of attitude can actually spill over to other areas of your life. So how to use quiet quitting to your advantage and turn it into a successful career change? Overall, I'd say you have two options. Option one is that you continue to stay in your company anyway, but instead of continuing to quietly quit, try and change the things that you dislike about your job. For example, try and work in a different department or negotiate your workload with your employer. Anything that gets you in the mood for working again and getting out of that quiet quitting attitude. Or option number two, and as you can guess, I'm a much bigger fan of that, use this quiet quitting experience to explore new opportunities. If you really feel the need to quiet quit, then so be it, but do it for a very short amount of time, just several months, and during those several months, figure out what you want to do next. And once those 3 months are over, then leave your company and start living your life.